You've both blown my mind using software to upgrade the software. So I just wanted to ask both of you, from your both perspectives, using software to upgrade the software. So just tell us about the benefits of doing that.
I'm still trying to think of what software we're talking about. So using technology or data to unpack or tap into software. If software is the experience of place, what we're seeing at the moment is that the society is moving into an experience economy. So what that means is people now gain social status, or the things that they value coming from the experience of the things that they do, which is a post-consumer mindset. So once upon a time we had social status from Calvin Klein jeans and driving a Jeep, and now it's smashed avocado on toast and going to Bali. And it's not just millennials driving this, baby boomers are driving it even more so. And so the way people want to socialise or want to live their lives is changing, and this changes what they expect out of the neighbourhoods that they're in. So they want to go to authentic main streets that feel unique and differentiated. They want to see the barista, they want to see the coffee roaster, they want to meet the brewer, they want to have this whole experience rather than just consume. And so that is actually what software is the experience. It's the things that you do there and the personality and what makes it memorable. And so for us, if the question's around, why use technology to do it, I as a placemaker didn't feel like I could adequately, as an expert, come into communities and think I could identify those things. I needed the communities to tell me what they were, and you can do that in a great way with community engagement, assuming you can get a good cross-section of people in, but we just felt that information needed to be augmented, and that's why we think that using unconventional data is a great way to also see what else you might miss from community engagement.
I'll use both. I think from my perspective in the work we do with clients, it becomes more, again, about that confidence. We look at, Dean, your graph about the enabling framework. We're getting a lot of questions now. We're being asked, what sort of incentives do we need to provide to businesses? How can we try to create that better environment to help businesses create more jobs? And so it does become that softer side, again, about being able to liaise with businesses, understand what they're going through, and then being able to plug in, because all of you do have a very important role to play, in the economy and building those strong and vibrant places. And it's about how to unlock that. Typically local government's really, really good at dealing with residents in one way, shape, or form. But dealing with businesses or investors just becomes a bit different, or, oh no, and yes, we've heard stories of certain mayors and councils going to jail and doing wrong things, but it's about what can be done to really try to create those things, to enable that growth to occur, so that the local government, state government, federal government is not in the way, and then those businesses can contribute to the places that we're trying to build, to make them vibrant, to provide the jobs, to provide the baristas and the brewers, and the impetus for all of those sorts of experiences have to come from that partnership, that collaboration. And so that's something we try to work very hard on, is how can local governments collaborate and work as partners with investors, their local businesses, to create those sort of experiences.
I'll open it up to the floor for questions shortly, but I've got a million here, so if you don't have any, don't feel embarrassed. But one question just before I do throw to the floor. You both touched on sentiment and confidence and the vibe. So how important is that to placemaking?
That makes sense. Look, from my perspective, it's ultimately important, and it's that one thing we can't go to the shop and pull it off the shelf. So it has to be created organically. You look at these major precincts globally, like Silicon Valley, always held up as this bastion of technology and innovation and greatness. It grew because those sheds on the other side of the hill were cheap, and that's all the dudes could afford. That's what attracted them to Silicon Valley to begin with. But I think you're saying that vibe, that confidence, perception, all of these things are really, really important and have a direct impact on how communities will grow, towns, cities. If you're seen as that progressive city that's innovative, that's easy to do business, you have a great lifestyle, then you're going to be that, in the minds of the people who consume those things. And equally, if you're the opposite, then that's immediately what you are. If you are a place that's hard to deal with, stuck in its ways, conservative, then that's what you're also going to be. So that vibe, that perception is really, really important to being able to build really, really vibrant places.
I want to add to that as well by saying it's also very hard to articulate the vibe, and it's so subjective. And if you think you can distill it into 4 words, then you've got it wrong. And I see a lot of placemaking kind of accidentally slip into place branding, or if we can distill the vibe into a tagline that makes everyone knows they're, creative hipsters with brewing capability, I don't know, something. And, you're kind of missing the point. And so what we see a lot is that the vibe or the perspective is something that locals can understand and can feel connected to, and it can often be hard for outsiders to see it straight away. But also it changes through the year. So, when daylight savings starts or when winter finishes or whatever it might be, when AFL season's on or something, the neighbourhoods fundamentally change in lots of different ways, and as they should. And we see, I think everyone in the room could name 5 Australian main streets that once were great, and then almost like people got surprised when they stopped being great because they, suddenly they've got these vacancies and they're not the great, hubs anymore. Maybe they become a victim of their own success because once somebody place branded them and goes, oh, that's the retail street in Melbourne, and forget about it. And actually that place is changing all the time and actually starts to decline. So when thinking about vibe, and that's particularly the key, the thing that community-led placemaking unlocks is it's so dynamic with what exactly is happening in that community. So making that differentiation between this community-led movement and like place branding, which is actually something different.
I started work with our company was working for a local government, and we were starting next week on that Monday, and I was lining up for coffees and going out talking to various people, and everyone was like, oh, that place is doomed. It's such a bad place. I never go there anymore. It used to be great, but now it's terrible. So even me coming in as an outsider going, well, if everyone's talking it down, and particularly the local businesses and residents are talking it down, why would anyone want to go there? And it's a self-reinforcing cycle. So sentiment is really hard to capture, but you kind of know about it as well. You know those streets or those places or those local government areas that you avoid or don't go to because of what you've heard. So, yeah. On that note, anyone got any questions for the panel? No. Well, okay, I'll get my questions going. So, listening to people, we touched on that a little bit, particularly Michael, you said as well, like the community consultation and that sort of thing. But how important is it to go beyond that to the involvement and that real data that really affects place?
I think it's really important, but again, forging those really strong partnerships allows you to actually get and maintain information and data along the way as well. If it's seen or perceived as just that community consultation that their council's going to do once a year, people get used to that, and they sort of desensitizes them a bit. But also having issues that really crystallize their passion, be it the local traders, they might be about, we're talking to clients now about, sprucing up the joint because everyone's going on, we're getting a little run down. So how can they partner, those local traders, partner with the local council to actually run those projects? And that's easy. They tip in a bit of money from council. They control it. They're empowered, and they'll let you know how it's going because they're involved in that process. They own it, and so they're going to be very passionate about making sure they get the outcomes that they're looking for. So I think forging those really strong partnerships, with local community groups or areas, is a way to help unlock some of that information. Otherwise, we'll be stuck to the ABS and all the normal places we get a lot of our data from.
Just to add to that quickly as well, I think it's important to think about local governments. Local governments do a phenomenal job now in community engagement. When I was a young urban designer, we were taught about, there was one community engagement subject, and it was kind of like a nice to have if you want to do some cool, context analysis, you might speak to some people, otherwise you just do what you do as an expert. And so of course we're a long way from that mindset now, almost 20 years on. So it's great to see that, but the fatigue actually is catching up to us now where communities, again, that's kind of the norm, is consultation fatigue. But what I discovered as a placemaker in my previous life is that, the people, that councils can often end up in an echo chamber of the same people that come to the same meetings, and there's a whole bunch of others that don't even know council has a website and don't know that what kinds of, they think it's just got the library on it. They don't know that there's all sorts of other things that they can do, and so how to break your own echo chamber and get out and try and understand not just who the residents are, but who are the users, who are the people passing through, who are the visitors, the workers, all of those other things. If we planned all our infrastructure just on the people that live somewhere, we'd never have any public squares in town centres because you just think not many people live there. So, I challenge all councils to be thinking about not just, whether they're getting people to turn up, but who those people are, and are they really representative of all of the users within that community.
And while you've got the microphone, Jessica, that privacy question.
That
Everyone's
was
too
for
polite.
them to ask, not you.
Tell us a little bit more about that.
Look, privacy with data is a really interesting topic at the moment, and Cambridge Analytica, you might have heard of it, happened about 2 months after I launched my business. So, no, but what's this issue of privacy is so interesting and so important, and I believe that in Australia we're going to see a much more robust, as is happening around the world, a much more robust public discourse around what is appropriate and what isn't appropriate from a privacy point of view. And the boundaries of privacy are shifting all the time as technology changes. I worked at Brisbane City Council when aerial photography came in Google Maps, and council went out and fined everyone with illegal swimming pools because they could now see into backyards. And there was this big debate at the time around no, that is private. You would never have been legally allowed to look over my fence and see into my yard, so you are not allowed to fine me for suddenly this new technology. So the kind of outcome was an amnesty, and everyone who got busted then had an amnesty to apply for planning approval and all that without a fine for a certain amount of time, and council officers were sent out to the street to see whether they would have been able to see that illegal structure from the street, and if they could, the fine stood, and if they couldn't, if it was a high fence, the fine didn't stand, and it was seen as that was a private backyard. And so I see that happening now. Some people say, Instagram, if your account is not private, is it private? Are you really posting privately or publicly? And I'm not trying to say that I believe one way or another, because it's not for me to say, but the public is starting to get engaged in this, and there's all sorts of data sharing that happens from the government and other people that have big data repositories that people aren't aware of what happens with that data and how you can be personally identified from your license plate on your car when you go into the airport to use the car parking or whatever it is. People aren't aware of that, and I think we're going to see a lot more debate around that. The flip side of that is there's actually so much data out there that can be used that is not in any way private data, personal data. So our whole platform is built without any personal data. And I don't mean we have it and we just don't show it. We don't even capture it. There's no way we could ever tell who posted something or anything like that. We're just looking at, when people are tagging a business on Instagram and Facebook and Strava, we're getting that business information, not the personal posts. So there's actually no need often to go near personal data. So privacy also doesn't need to be such a hot topic.
Do we have any questions? Yes, we've got one down the back there.
Yeah, certainly, and we get that question all the time. Look, it's tricky because often when people start, our policy is to be, and what we do is we're very transparent about exactly what the data sources are, and any one of the data points in our dashboard, the user can click on and go and see the original source in Strava or Google or Facebook or Instagram or wherever it might be, so they can very quickly see that it's all just we're just linking together thousands and thousands of public data points on the internet, basically, and computing that way. That's tricky for lots of organisations, though, because there are many data points they have on their citizens that are not public information. That they are private, CRM managed information. Systems that they have, and so that can be a very tricky thing to do, is to say with our open data policy we're going to be transparent on exactly where we got every single data point. So I'm not necessarily saying what works for our business works for your organisation, but certainly a lot of the councils that use our data hand the dashboards over to chambers of commerce and traders who are going through it with a fine-tooth comb, and none of them have ever come back and raised concern at any sort of privacy issues. So that full disclosure works really well for us.
Thanks. My name's Sid. I'm from the City of Casey. You all raised some really good points around different ways that we can move forward in placemaking. One of the things that I've identified in my experience is there's an appetite to explore a whole new form of governance, new innovations and whatnot. However, we often hit hurdles of capabilities, and it's often owing to things such as statutory obligations around privacy or regulation and whatnot. So I'm just curious, in terms of those types of things, whether it's methods of incentivisation or regulatory reform, is there anything that stands out as being one of the biggest hurdles for us to move forward in placemaking? And of those hurdles, what's the solution?
Thanks for that. Was it a hospital ball? No, I think we could go anywhere with this. Wow. There's two things from my perspective. On the one hand, local governments by their nature are conservative beasts. You all know all this, and so you act conservative, and so it's hard when there's new things coming out to really embrace that because simply, well, that we've never done that before. That being said, I think there are some really, really good innovative models that are really localized into centers, streets, those sort of things. So if you look, anyone heard of the Business Improvement District model in Canada and US and that sort of stuff? You know, this is a great way to embrace the local community and let them decide, you know, how things need to evolve. And you know, we've worked with Brisbane Marketing, and there's no reason why legally you can't do this in Australia. You know, we've proven that it's actually been done in Port Macquarie. They did it as part of their city centre revitalisation. It's simply about, you know, having a nonprofit organization that has that governance model, and then start creating different avenues for funding. And whether it's each business in the town centre or the main street chips in a little bit, and then council comes and adds to it. You know, so again, council's getting a discount, you know, for infrastructure improvements and streetscaping or events or whatever the thing that the businesses, the community in that centre want to do. You know, then it's partially funded, but then also empower the community to make the decision about how to spend that money. And, you know, knowing you guys, you got, you know, Cranbourne West and Nair Warren, and you got all sorts of different centres, some old, some new. You know, so looking at that model to empower those local communities on what they want, you know, to see in terms of, it might be events on Friday afternoon or something, or it might be the streetscaping, or who knows. But empowering them to make those decisions builds more of that partnership. You know, there's shared risk, but they're also actually, you know, part of that process. So they're a lot less likely to throw stones at council afterward when they were actually part of that process who made that decision. So I think those sort of innovative models, you know, really should have a future in Australia. And I think it's just going to get a couple more of those case studies to prove it up and show that it can be done. Because it is, you all are conservative beasts by nature, and so we need that evidence base to prove that these things are okay to do. No one's going to get in trouble, all those sorts of things. Anyone else?
My microphone got stolen from me. Yeah, I think that's a really interesting question. So the way we've worked with and trained our communities is they expect you guys to do it all. And then they get annoyed when something goes wrong, or my verge, blah, 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 or parking issues. So all the responsibility and care is placed on government. And that's not very fair from either party's perspective. So I think this is a process, and it takes time, and it takes relationship building, and all this is hard work. But over a period of time, I think we need to reframe the roles and responsibilities of community and government, and in essence, let go of control a little bit from the government perspective, and on the community side, increase responsibility and care. Because we're all in this together. We all want to create great communities and societies, and at the moment, what we're doing now is not working. Now, if you look at some of the huge issues, Ethan mentioned a couple, climate change and environment's a big one, but the really scary thing for me is 35% of Australians trust government. 35%. So 65% of people either don't know the answer to that question or don't trust government. Now, in terms of the risk matrix, that would be the biggest risk for government and government sector employees to be thinking about. How can we increase people's engagement in their community, their willingness to volunteer, but also how do you build trust with your community? Because we've seen examples around the world of societies breaking down because of lack of trust. Now, I think Jessica mentioned about loneliness, mental health. They're all the emerging issues that I'm sure you're experiencing in your areas, and we really need to tackle. So doing what we're doing now is not solving the problems, and you could argue that they're exacerbating the issues. So, like I said, big statements, but we need to start thinking about this, trying new models, empowering local people, and that's not going to happen overnight. So we need to start now, and it could take a long time, but I think the future's really exciting, and I've seen it happening where you trust local people and then they actually deliver well above your expectations. And that's the best thing about my job, helping local people do what they want to do to improve their community. And I'm continually blown away and surprised at the level of skill and expertise out there. And how do I know that? Well, you guys are all community members as well. You do your daytime job and then you go home and you're incredibly professional, experienced citizens that we need to empower and need to help and support. So I think it's the thinking is the biggest barrier at the moment. I've seen it work. I know it can work, but we've got to spend more time making it work. Yes. I'm going to make some enemies here. So the two that really inspire us that are reframing their local government around place, and I will qualify this statement at the end, but they're reframing place as being core business. So not to say that you can always get rid of the silos, and to some extent you're always going to have service delivery departments that are very good at what they do, but they're delivering one particular service. But place is a way to organise your local government and get people on the same page, to break down those silos. So the town of Victoria Park basically has a structure now where you have the council and the CEO at the top, you have the departments doing their thing, but you have place as the key organising tool in the middle. And before capital works or operational budgets are set, the place people are coordinating, cooperating, talking, making sure everyone knows what's going on, so you don't build a toilet block where you're going to build the road the next day. So Town of Victoria Park's doing it well. The City of Vincent is on that path as well. I know that Swan and Wanneroo are very focused on place as well. Don't know as much personally about what they're doing, but place is the way to break down your silos and to organise and get your local government machines operating more efficiently.